Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic? Let's do it. What's the creepiest thing that you have ever witnessed? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Driving on the interstate late at night, the road was decently foggy, so visibility was somewhat reduced. In the distance, there was a light waving back and forth through the fog in the middle of the road, slowly getting more pronounced as I got closer. I got close enough to then see that it was a guy waving his phone flashlight to alert oncoming traffic. Right in the area past him were two cars that had just crashed and bodies all over the road. No first responders there yet or anything. And just carnage and a man flashing a light. It was about a decade ago. I was convinced I saw a brother of a friend who had committed suicide a year earlier when I was walking one night back to my car spot. The street was packed as it was outside of a movie premiere. It was raining heavily. I stopped while my wife kept walking, and I stared at him for what felt like an eternity from a relatively short distance. People got irritated that I was taking up valuable, non-raining real estate. I even worked up the courage to tell my friend, and he told me he had been dreaming about him and was having conversations with him in his sleep. A few things come to mind. One of them wasn't seen, but this was maybe 18 years ago. I and my girlfriend at the time were lying in bed at her house, and normally she keeps the door shut and the cats out so they don't climb up on the bed and start licking our faces. So I feel something on top of the covers on my leg, like the weight of a cat, and I sleepily mentioned to her that one of the cats got inside, and she says, "No, I'm sure they're not in here." And then she felt the covers pulled like something under the bed. We turned on the lights, and sure enough, there were no cats in there, but she had a scratch on her hand and was bleeding. I lived in a house that had some serious paranormal shit happening in it. I've seen shadow people. I was in the living room, and I saw a shadow of a man walk past one window on the outside and then walk past the next window. I thought my brother was outside and was about to come through the back door, but he didn't. I asked my mom what he was doing outside, and she said he's at work. That set off alarm bells. That someone was in the backyard, but no one was there. Shadow people. One night, the lights in mine and my brother's bedrooms, we shared a room, started flashing without reason. My mom came in and it stopped, and the lights were still on, but the switch was in the off position. My sister saw demonic shadows closing in on her from all directions one night. Her rocking chair was rocking back and forth by itself violently, and the drawers on her dresser were opening and slamming closed on their own. Again, my mom walked in because my sister was screaming, and everything stopped. My mom could see the chair still rocking, but slowing to a stop, and could hear the sound of the handles of the dresser still swinging. One time, the dog was having the time of its life, like having its tummy scratched by no one. We were all watching her loving life, and then she opened her eyes, saw all of us sitting down watching her, and then jumped up, clearly bothered and wanting to know who was just petting her. My grandma says she saw Western folk playing cards in my sister's room one night. She was on meds, but given the other weird shit that happened, it might be valid. I think there was some other shit, but I can't remember. I experimented with a Ouija board in my childhood, thinking it was a big, stupid, laughable joke. I don't want to give the experience any more power, but I cannot stress how it is imperative to not use them. They are not a game like Monopoly or Life. They are not a mixed medium. The idea that it's a 50-50 conduit between getting a good spirit or a bad one. And it's not a psychological mind power play of subconscious suggestion. Avoid, avoid, avoid. Completely.
I mean, I just wanted to be clear that I did not write that post about the Ouija board, and I know some of you just think it's a silly game and blah blah blah. And you might be right, but I've read enough and seen enough to think, like, maybe there is something to it, and maybe we should avoid it.
When I was a kid, our cat often came into my room, jumped on my bed, walked over me, curled up somewhere, and fell asleep. It was actually really cute, and she did it quite often, even though I often woke up from it. Sometimes not, and we both got scared when I woke up and threw the blanket. One day, I woke up because I noticed my door was open slightly and a bit of moonlight came in my room. I'm sensitive to light when I sleep. That's why I always have my door closed and the shutters down. I even got special ones that make it absolutely dark. I saw the light on the ceiling, but closed my eyes again. I noticed little footsteps and recognized them as the ones from my cat. After a decade with the same pet, you get used to its sounds. Then, same procedure. She walked in, jumped on my bed, walked over me, curled up on my legs, and slept. I was kind of annoyed she woke me and even mumbled her name annoyedly, but I also fell asleep again. Later I stood up and went downstairs for breakfast. Like always, Mom asked me how I slept, and I told her I was quite annoyed because the cat woke me up since someone left my door open. She lifted an eyebrow and said that the cat was outside the whole night and no one opened the door. That was over 20 years ago, and I still remember the feeling of the cold chill running down my spine. The creepiest thing I've seen is driving home late one night from a party. I saw a man in the road disappear. This was around 2009, outside of a smallish town in Texas, on a road with a lot of hills. I was coming down one of those hills, and just at the edge of my headlights, I saw a dark figure in the middle of the road. The best I could make out was a long dark coat with a dark hat. I couldn't see any other features. I did a bit of a snap out of it head shake, and it was gone. I turned to my friend in the passenger seat to see if he saw the same thing, but he was passed out. So it was just me and, I guess, the hat man. The logical part of me says it was just my brain playing tricks on me, but it still gives me the heebie-jeebies to this day. Typing that made me think of another one that happened but was heard, not seen. As I mentioned in the last story, I'm from a smallish town in Texas, about 25,000 people at the time. So, not teeny tiny, but small enough that there's not much to do late at night. One thing was driving around in the country, which I was doing late one night with the windows down, enjoying the cooler night air. I'm on my way back into town, coming from the same area as the first story. I make a turn onto the highway that leads back to town, and I hear a loud scream, yell, or overall hard to describe sound directly outside of my passenger window. And when I say loud, I mean the kind of noise that rattles your ear a little, louder than the music in my car. I immediately look out the window and see nothing. No cars, no people, no clues anywhere as to what just scared the shit out of me. Of course, I didn't stick around to investigate more because I did not want to find out what could have made that sound. When I was first married, my husband and I had a cat who used a pet door to come and go often after catching and killing a mouse or gopher, which she would regurgitate inside. One night, we were sleeping and woke to the sound of her hacking in the room with us. Neither of us wanted to get up later and step on a semi-digested small mammal. In my case, having done so previously, we both began asking the other to please get up and turn the light on so it could be cleaned up. In my case, I worked till midnight and had just gotten to sleep. After several minutes of arguing, which was becoming heated, the overhead light suddenly came on, seemingly by itself. Not sure I got back to sleep that night. I have a vague memory of finding a dead body on a family member's property. It was a big wooded area with the next door neighbors miles away. I was so young, but I remember being with a bunch of cousins, and we were walking the property board, and we found something covered in some bushes not extremely far from the house, like within view, and older cousins suddenly took the group we were heading back to the house. I didn't see it, though. I saw the bushes they had looked in and remember it being large enough to definitely hide something in. Police came, and cousins told us they took the body. About 20 years ago, in a house we considered to be quite haunted, I was in the kitchen when a fly started buzzing around. It was particularly annoying, so I grabbed a fly swatter and smacked it. I made contact and 2 flies flew off across the room from the impact, so I swatted again, and a couple more went sailing across the room. Within a couple of minutes, the room was full of flies, hundreds of them. I even saw them coming from the glare of the ceiling light. I killed a bunch of them, and after about 15 minutes of feeling like I was in a horror movie, they thinned out and flew into the living room, never to be seen again. There were a couple of 100 dead ones I left in the sink so my wife could see them when she got home. We had a lot of weird stuff happen in that house. This was by far the weirdest and creepiest, and the only one that scared me, and I'm not afraid of anything, except flies. Backwoods cult houses. One time, I, my mom, and my grandma got lost in the mountains at night. We eventually got to a clearing lined with perfect white houses, lined down with no lights or cars, and a large church at the end of the road facing our car. My mom told my grandma to turn around, but she kept saying we should get out and ask someone, but my mom was insisting on it. As we turned around, a bunch of people in white robes came out of the woods holding weapons. We sped out of there and eventually found a gas station. The cult is known about, but their location isn't, and we have no idea what they would have done if we got out. My mother-in-law is really creepy. She has an eerie appearance, like it looks uncanny or not of human. She came over with a mustache like Tom Selleck, and I went to her and her husband to offer tea. My father-in-law was facing me, and she turned around, so the look caught me by surprise. Her husband looked at me like it was normal that she had a really thick, manly mustache. Also, when she prays, she screams really loud and cries and wails. So the fact that all of this is normalized makes me really creeped out. It's not just the mustache, it's everything. Something is really off and different from something I've witnessed in someone before. I went to a concert with 2 neighbors, 2 brothers. We lived in a slum, and when we returned in the middle of the night, the bus did not get into our favela at night. We had to cross the entire favela walking. I decided to not go with them because I don't want to deal with the hundreds of dogs in the way. So I walk alone by the road that goes to the edge of the favela, a longer walk. When I got to my home, in a nearby street, they had bumped into a guy that had trouble with, and they tried to kill the guy. A lady who lives right by my house told me to go there and then call for help. I was joking about it, literally laughing. I was a teenager, and violence was an everyday situation for everyone in that place. I thought they had beaten the guy unconscious. He was a kid like me. When I got close, they had tried to burn the guy alive. His skin had come out of his body and his back, and his face was a mess of unrecognizable meat. I was with them like minutes before. They're like 14 and 16 or 17 years old. The thing was brutal. How did they burn him alive? It was a really big shock for me. The guy survived, but had to run away from the place. I had a client who had a reputation as a womanizer. He was 50-ish, balding, and pudgy. I never had direct dealing with the guy, but rather with someone else in his firm. But when my client contact left, I had to deal with this guy directly. So, he asked me to visit one of his clients on a long road trip, about a 3-hour drive, and he brought his 23-year-old account assistant along, some girl fresh out of college. I sat in the back, while the two of them sat in the front. Mind you, she was really attractive, and I'm a guy, but there's no way I would do anything but keep things strictly professional. While he drove, he would snake his right hand over the seat and start playing with her hair. I was thinking, ugh, in the back, while he twirled strands around his index finger and chatted with us about the meeting, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I noticed she kept shifting further and further toward the passenger door until she was basically out of the reach. So instead of playing with her hair, he would lay his paw on her shoulder. Finally, mercifully, we arrived and had our 2-hour meeting. When it was time to drive back, I sidled up to Lauren and asked, "Do you want to sit in the back this time?" And she said, "Oh God, thank you." She pled illness and sat in the back while I rode shotgun with this sleazeball on the return trip. The next day, she called me to say thanks and told me how this guy was relentless when it came to chasing her around the office. When I recommended getting another job, she said, "Trust me, but I need this job right now." A week after that, he offered me a job. I said, "Well, Jimmy, thanks for the offer, but anything below an outrageous, totally made-up sum would be a cut in pay." After that, he and I parted ways, and I couldn't have been more happy about it. I travel every week in professional sales. I was traveling through New England, and it was getting late, so I decided to get a room. This place was clean and quiet and had great views. I had dinner in a local restaurant and took out my book just before I turned on the lights. I noticed a logbook on a coffee table. After reading the entries, I found out that this place was haunted. I didn't think much of the haunting stories, so I went to bed. At about 3 a.m., I woke up and saw a face about 6 inches away from me. It startled me, but I went to the bathroom and back to bed. At 5:30, I woke up to the feeling someone was sitting on the bed. The sheets and blankets felt tight, as if weight was holding them down. At this point, I was wide awake and decided to shave and take a shower. Did I have an experience with a ghost-like creature? I believe so. A 3-way intersection, think a T with the bottom part coming in at an angle, where I was stopped at the light. My light turns green. I'm on the top of the T, but there's a car slowly rolling into the intersection from the bottom of the T. It trolls slowly through and gently bonks into the traffic light pole at the top. This whole time, I can see the driver sitting at the wheel with his hands on it, looking completely normal. He hits the pole, slumps forward, hits the horn with his head. This was before airbags were common, but it was a Volvo, so maybe he didn't hit hard enough and falls forward. My 17-year-old ass casually gets out because this guy is now blocking the road. Not because I had any concern for another person. I was trying to get to a record store, damn it, to find out the dude is dead. Luckily, there were some adults at the intersection to deal with it, but apparently he just stroked out as he was approaching the light. Nothing supernatural or anything, but I can still see that dead guy driving his car through the intersection and walking up to his window, kind of pissed off, only to see a waxy, open-mouthed corpse in a suit with his hands on the wheel and head on the horn. This happened to a friend. One summer afternoon, this guy went on a camping trip to a mountain with some of his school friends. They took an almost abandoned road where, much to their surprise, they found a small house hidden between some hills in the middle of goddamn nowhere. Filled with curiosity, They decided to check it out. It was the moment of the day when the afternoon starts turning into night, and it was evident that someone had the lights on the inside of the house. They knocked on the door, nothing. Knocked again, nothing. Some of them decided to peep through a window. They saw a TV on a dead channel, white noise coming through the speakers, in front of the TV a bed, and an apparently sick man in it, not moving at all. They left immediately, of course. Some of them, including my friend, couldn't spend the night at the mountain, so they had to return. It was in the middle of the night, pitch dark, and they took a look at the house again. They look through the window, and nothing has changed. The same man, the same TV, on the same dead channel. A sick, dying, maybe man, watching a dead channel, alone in a house, in the middle of nowhere. Alright, here's my spooky story. 3 of my friends and I were utterly bored during a summer night, and we figured we'd go for a mini road trip. We weren't really aiming to go anywhere, but rather just hopped onto the highway and proceeded to follow it wherever. We did this when gas was still a reasonable price. So it's about 2 in the morning. We'd been driving since about 10 p.m., and we had gotten off the highway and wandered into some little town in the middle of Pennsylvania. The road we were on kept becoming more narrow until it eventually became a single-lane road just passing through the town. We eventually passed by a small cemetery, and as I look out my window, I see a family standing at the entrance of the cemetery, dressed in Sunday church clothes, just sitting across the street with a blank expression. We were doing about 30 miles per hour, and I was able to tell that it was a tall man, probably the father, standing next to his wife and 2 teenage-looking kids next to them, and the daughter holding a stroller. The stroller looked very vintage, like one of those you see from the 50s or 60s. They didn't move or do anything. They just stood there in a line in front of the cemetery and stared across the street, which had nothing more than tall grass. Needless to say, I freaked out and screamed like a girl when I saw this. And that's when everyone else in the car turned and saw this too, at which point they all screamed like girls, and we punched it out of that freaky town. To this night, I still can't rationalize what I saw that night. I used to be a nervous sleeper, listening to sounds, making sure my curtains were closed to prevent something from looking in at me, and so on. I was probably about 15, and my parents had gone away for the weekend, so I was alone in the house. Around 3 a.m., I wake up. Why am I awake? I have no idea. Did I hear something? No. How odd. So I'm lying there, listening to the house and slowly falling back asleep, when my bedroom door, which I knew I had shut, clicks audibly, and the latch disengages and swings about a quarter of the way open. I turn into a pile of goosebumps and lie there still for quite a while, straining my eyes and against the dark and silence. Finally, I switch on the light. This is worse because all I can see in the hallway is darkness, and now I am visible to whatever lurks outside. It took me ages lying there, covered in goosebumps, to gain the courage to get up and check what was going on. Turns out, it was the wind, blowing my not quite properly shut door open. The house is on a hill and shifts a little from time to time, making some doors stop latching shut properly. Mundane, really, but the most goosebump-inducing, creeped out I've ever been in my life. Looking into that perfectly black hallway through a narrow crack of the door, if some pale hand had come through the door, or some eyes had glinted back, or a darker form had shifted in that darkness, I would have been terrified, but not entirely surprised.